So, hello everybody. It is me, Demetra K, and I am sitting here with Mr. Pink, Terrell Pink to be exact, and he is the author of The Blood of Kings and Slaves, and also the creator, if you will, of the podcast, which he is working on. And so he's going to be getting that all over social media and eventually TV, right? Sooner than later.
I
So
like how you're thinking.
yeah, see, think big. So anyway,
Hmm.
the purpose of the Demetra K Show is to promote Black love, knowledge, and understanding of all things that go on in the Black community to make us an even better people with the emphasis on even because we are great people, but we can always strive to do better. Of course, normally Donovan is here, but he was traveling yesterday, and so I'm sure he's a little bit tired. So he'll join us when I get back from vacation. Now, like I said, big giant thank you, hello, and welcome to YouTube and Facebook. Twitter, I can't go live on there from some odd reason, but I will figure out why I cannot. But nevertheless, you all are not just viewers, but you are family. And sometimes we share the link, although I don't think we'll share it today. But this is the highly anticipated interview that I've been telling you all about for about a couple of months now. So all I ask is for you guys in the comment section is that we are respectful. And if you have some questions, I would like for you to put, like a cue, a question, and I'll know that I need to address that. And I'm going to try to address as many as I can. But admittedly, I will be focused on having a conversation with Terrell so we can get a better understanding of his book and why he wrote the book. So who's on here? Arneva and Troy, how you doing? So, Terrell, how are you doing today? I understand this is your first interview.
It is, Dee. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. So,
Looking forward to this.
I know that you are. And I should also say that I have known Terrell for quite some time. Very smart brother. I think you have to be very smart to write a book. Like I always want to write a book, but I'm like, "Ugh, where do I start?" And
It, it wasn't easy, and I had some challenges.
yes, I know because I read the chapters that you sent me, and they're very good. I will admit that they are very, very good. Quita, how you doing? Okay, so we'll give people just a moment or two more to kind of come on in, because people say, "What are we talking about?" And all of that. So anyway, normally this is what we call, I don't know what Wednesdays is called. It was Wealth Wednesdays with Walter, then it was Where is Walter, then it was
Mhm.
about relationships, and now it's just a toss up for a lack of better word. So hey, Easy, how you doing? All right, dear Terrell, let's get into it. So you have penned The Blood of Kings and Slaves, and I want to know why. What prompted you to do that?
Well, let's start with the actual title.
Okay.
I'm not sure where it came to me. It just kind of came to me about 15 to 17 years ago. Um, when my two adult children, when they were young, and I thought they were underachieving. My poor babies had no idea what I was talking about. I would stand in front of them all fire and brimstone and say, as you stand here today in Altaloma, California, you have the blood of a king and a slave running through you right now. It takes a great person to lead and serve, no matter how they got there, and we owe them no less than our best efforts. So do better. So that has been like a guiding principle in my life and with my children for going on 2 decades now. Um, so, that's why there's certain things that I don't do to honor, my ancestors, our ancestors. One topic in particular that usually upsets people, our people, is that I'm very particular with the type of soul food that I eat. So my book is peppered with pictures of my ancestors. So I go as far as back with my great 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 grandfather, who was born in 1828 as a slave. He died in 1937 as a free man, of course. I believe, if my math is right, he lived to 109 years old. So he was forced to eat leftover animal parts. I'll be damned if I eat the tail of an ox. I owe him more than that. So it's things like that that and you know and I that and that philosophy has kind of evolved in other areas of my life in terms of breaking stereotypes, um, not falling victim to what I call the sub black culture. That's chapter 4 in the book. Um, I grew up. I was born August 19th, 1970. Okay, which I talk about in my foreword. I remember when hip hop and rap music we couldn't find on the radio. I remember pushing my mother's car 2 feet in the garage so I can catch K Day. Back when K Day was an AM station. I can tell you the first time I heard LL Cool J's radio, where I was standing when I heard Dougie Fresh, the party, the show. But that's as far as it goes for me. Those men are not my heroes. Jay Z is not my hero. Okay. My heroes are what I believe were the true civil rights leaders in this country. My hero is my uncle, the man who raised me, things like that. And sometimes I feel that the sub black culture has taken over black culture, and it disappoints me.
So can you describe sub black culture?
Oh well, how I'll give you an example. So my entire life,
Mm-hmm.
um, I've all I've always been told, you don't act black, you don't sound black. Those negative stereotypes that have always been projected onto me by who I call white liberals and their black allies. Um, just things that black men are known to do. Like the man who raised me, I'll go into that later if you want to. The reason why I refer to him as the man who raised me is he would always say, "Don't do what white people expect you to do."
Now,
So all
well, explain that. What does that mean? Don't do what
what,
white people expect you to do. And let me hold on a second. Hello to everybody that came on here. I see you guys' comments. And I'm gonna get to you guys' comments. As I said, if y'all have a question that y'all because we about to get into it, have a question, put a Q by it so I'll know that you specifically want me to read your question. I'm gonna read as many as I can. So what does that mean exactly? Don't do as white people want you said expect you to do?
yes, expected to do.
Mhm.
Sag your pants, play your music loud in your car, always show up late, things like that.
Okay, so basically the
Or,
expectation
or,
because that's how they see
or
black people.
yes,
Got you.
you know how
Oh,
we dress, things like that. And
okay.
when I was a young boy, I resented it. Um, I couldn't understand where he was coming from. Like my parents wouldn't let me get a Jerry curl. I couldn't wear I couldn't wear fat laces. Yeah, I was in high school in the '80s, so I couldn't wear fat laces. I remember one day in the driveway of my parents' house, my mother had a fit because I was wearing a Public Enemy T-shirt because she thought it was a cop in the crosshairs of a scope, right? But really, it was a b-boy. That was a Kango. It wasn't a cop. But anyway, so it was stuff like that. Um, I've evolved that thought as I've gotten older, and I would just tweak it just a certain way. I would say, don't do what white liberals expect black people to do, because those negative stereotypes have never been projected onto me in corporate America, uh, or white people who are conservative. It's always white liberals who tell me you don't act black, you don't talk black. So that's what I'm talking about.
All right. So you ready for the question at hand?
Sure.
Okay. So um and let's see, this is chapter, I want to be clear. You sent me chapter 6 of your book, The Blood of Kings and Slaves. And the question it really as to why we're here. Uh it says a person who believes that when I walk into a room, the most Important thing that matters is the amount of melanin in my skin. So then you go on and ask the question, when was America great for Black people? And you say the simple answer, since day one. Yeah, I said it, but I also want to go back a little bit. You were saying how Donald Trump was actually asked the question, I think by T.I. and someone else, and you said that he fumbled the question, and you wish that you could have kind of, answered the question for him. And so here you answer it, you say, since day one. So again, I want to make
Okay.
sure that everybody understands this. Terrell is saying America was great for Black people since day one. Firstly, what's day one?
Okay. So there's a little context that you're leaving out, D.
Okay.
So
You
allow
know
me to
I can do
explain.
that.
Yeah. Okay. So I believe that there are some inconvenient truths about slavery that Black Americans need to come to grips with. Okay. So, in the context of the diaspora of where the 12 million slaves were sold into slavery by other Africans, right?
Mhm.
So, I've known for decades that the smallest portion, around 300,000, less than 1%, ended up in what is now known as the USA. The rest ended up in Mexico, not Mexico, Central and South America, the Caribbeans, some Arab countries. Uh, However, the ones who were forced to walk to Arab countries are no longer with us because they were turned into eunuchs and the women into concubines. So when you look at the context of where we come from, you and I, our children, we come from the lucky 300,000 that ended up here, not in some Arab country or not in Central or South America. So I don't deny the fact that slavery and everything that followed was horrible, but the world was full of slavery. Back then, before the transatlantic slave trade, most people who were enslaved, they were enslaved by their neighbors. Africans enslaved Africans, Native Americans enslaved Native Americans. In Europe, Germans enslaved the Slavics. Northern Africans enslaved Europeans. We all come from slaves and we all come from enslavers. And that first 20 to 30 Africans that hit Virginia in 1619, right? They were originally on a ship from Portugal, but they lost their cargo, right? When
Mhm.
they ran to they ran into the British. And not to mention Portugal, right? So the British hit Virginia in 1619. But 200 years prior to that, the Portuguese was dropping off African slaves that were sold to them by other Africans in South America. That's why there's so many black folks in Brazil, and that's why they speak Portuguese. So my point is, you got to give it complete context of the history of slavery, which wasn't started by white guys in Europe,
Mhm.
okay? Um, and those tens of millions of people risking their lives to come to this country to cross our southern border, a lot of them have sub-Saharan DNA, African DNA, just like you and I.
Okay.
So go
Mhm.
ahead.
Oh no, so I got a couple of questions now. Hello to everybody that's come on here. I promise you, I'm gonna try to acknowledge y'all. Um, so you said one of the words that you use, and I wrote it down, and I see other people like lucky. So what do you mean by lucky? You say that of the three, it was about 300,000, give or take,
Mhm.
of us that came to the USA, right? So what do you mean by lucky?
I mean, it's pretty obvious that we were lucky that we ended up in the USA
Hmm.
and we didn't end up in what is now. I mean, the empirical data supports the fact that there there aren't Black Americans risking their lives walking 3,000 miles to Venezuela. It's the opposite. Since 1965, since 1965, since the Immigration Act of 65, there have been over 2 million Africans moved to America of their own free will.
Okay, so I got that because you said all that, and in the chapter that I read, and hopefully you
Mhm.
guys go get the book, because what you did send me, the excerpts are really interesting. I will say that. But when I hear the term lucky, because like you said, you're not denying the things that happened in slavery, which was brutal. I would venture to say no other people on this earth in any time has gone through what Black Americans, our ancestors, right, slaves, have gone through. So I guess what I'm trying to pinpoint is like, what was lucky about that? Have you ever? Let me ask you: have you ever read the slave narratives or heard of the slave narratives?
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
But let me address what you're saying. So you and I, our children, my son who's upstairs, we are lucky that we come from the lineage of that original 300,000, and then we're not living in Honduras right now. That's the luck I'm talking about. And I said you got to put slavery in its historical context.
Mhm.
Slavery was the way of the world. Slavery was the way of the world. And we are lucky that we didn't end up in Central and South America. I'm
Okay.
not sure
Mhm.
how else I could say that,
No,
but
no,
you brought up some other points too when you
yeah,
talked about
no, and
the most important.
I get what you're saying, because true, slavery was the way of the world, right? Indentured servitude, stuff like that. But do you think that the brutality that our ancestors endured, do you think that was the way of slavery? Was that the norm?
It some of it was even worse. Like I just mentioned, the Africans that were sold to Arab nations, they were turned into eunuchs. That was pretty bad.
I would say so.
That was
Yeah,
that
right,
was pretty bad.
right. So from that point, and it was bad. I'm not saying that it wasn't. So eventually, that probably ended for them, right? But slavery, went on from basically the
It it
1500s.
it
Go ahead.
it ended for them because they just died off.
Extinct, for lack of better words.
Okay, extinct.
Right.
But in America, in the USA, those 300,000 have turned into 42 million.
So let me ask you this. So, because I really want to just clarify, because I know people are like lucky, and so lucky
I'm
opposed
sorry. Go
to,
ahead.
because there were some of us here already, and then of course some that would made the middle passage. So I'm assuming, and I don't want to assume for you, but are you saying that we weren't better off where we were, or existing as we were before slavery? Like, help me out with that.
Okay, so I don't really have an opinion if we were better off.
Hmm.
Uh, I do know that there is a reason why the USA has an immigration problem. There is a reason why that people risk their life and limbs to come here, right? But I can't see the comments. But if people are surprised that I'm saying, we got lucky, I would ask your guests, your audience, like, where else would they want to live right now? Like for example, I said there's 2.1 million Africans that have moved here since 1965. Do you know how many? Do you know how many Black Americans have moved to Africa?
There's quite a few.
No, no.
There's
A
quite a
hundred.
few
No,
Black
no.
Americans that have moved to Africa.
No, it was in the six figures 100 years ago. But it is so minuscule now they don't even track it. Matter of fact, most more Black Americans will move to Mexico City, Panama, Lisbon, things like that. There isn't a drove of Africans uh, moving to Africa right now.
No, and that's true, and it probably has to do with economics. What I understand is not quite as easy to move there as it is other places. Have you ever been to Africa?
No, I haven't, but that doesn't. By the way, chapter 9. So your audience is really going to hate me now. So chapter 9 is entitled Africa. So the reason why I put so many pictures of my family in the book is I've heard it time and time again by white liberals and their black allies. Um, like, say, for instance, when a black person has a bad or acts inappropriately, say, for example, in a police interaction, I've heard them say they don't know where they come from, they don't know their history, we can't blame them. I call BS on that. I know my history. My people come from Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And I think it's time for Black Americans to understand that it's good enough to be a Black American. And there's an analogy that I use. So Mexicans, they are born of the same North American transatlantic slave trade. Excuse me, but no one ever tells Mexicans they don't know their history. I grew up in SoCal, Southern California, around Mexicans. I've been in Mexican homes, had Mexican friends all my life. They never talk about Spain. They never talk about Spain. So to answer your question, I have no more allegiance to Africa than I do Alaska. And it's good enough to be a Black American.
Okay, so let's take it a step back, and I see all you guys on here, and you know I'm gonna ask you about reparations, but I ain't gonna ask you right now. So I got you on the reparations, and again, hello to everybody that's come on here. I see your questions, but I really want to focus on speaking to Terrell. So describe great on day one. Like, what was great about it once we were, enslaved, for lack of better words? What was good about that? Like, how did that start being
No,
great?
no, no. I think what you're doing is you're taking it too literal. Obviously, those first 20 to 30 slaves that hit um, Virginia, it was not a great experience
Well, no,
for
I'm not
them.
even talking about them per se. I'm just talking about for uh, Black people, whether they were brought from the motherland or they were already here. How was slave, even let's say on day 2000, how was that good or great?
Because this country, there's no other country on this earth that has more opportunities and freedoms for people who look like me and you. You can't deny that. The empirical data is on my side. And that's why people who are darker than you and I are moving here in the millions. What do they know that we don't know? Why aren't white liberals at the border saying, don't come here? This country is systemically racist. Go back to where you come from. No, they want so, like, obviously it wasn't great on day one because they were slaves. They were in chains. And by the way, that's another reason why we owe them our best efforts. We owe them uh, not to be victims because they went through hell to get us here.
Okay, so stop
It-
right there, because I'm now that I'm one of those people when I read stuff, it starts to come back to me. So I want to take the word victim because and help me out. I don't want to misquote you, but from what I read, I kind of got the sense that because you were saying that the liberals, right, the white liberals,
Mhm.
have kind of taught Black Americans that we are victims. So do you feel like we are victims now, or let's say even after the plantation?
No, we're not victims. We have the blood of a king and a slave running through us right now. But I think it's unfortunate that a lot of us have been misled and really tricked into believing in our victimhood. Like earlier, you mentioned about uh, the melanin in my skin is not the most important thing when I walk in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not. It's not. So I've lived a wonderful life. I've been everywhere you can imagine except Africa. Okay. I've been in rooms you can imagine. I've been in rooms where white liberals and their black allies told me that I would not be accepted. And that's simply not true because the most important thing about me when I walk into a room is not my skin color. It's about my ability to solve problems, bring value, and most importantly, how I walk into a room.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to the victim thing, but you reminded me of something I wanted to ask you because when I hear that you say we are of kings and slaves,
Hmm.
I mean, wouldn't the king's life be pretty good?
Yeah, a king's life would be pretty good. Yes.
So if we are of kings and queens. I guess I'm just trying to figure out
It's
how.
metaphor. It's metaphorical. You don't have to, be so. Yeah, I understand that queens have existed. You don't have to be so literal. It's more of a mindset or worldview.
I'm not. I'm being
Okay.
literal. You know what? Admittedly, I am a very literal person to a fault sometimes, but I'm just going off of your book. So if you don't, just correct me if it's not supposed to be literal. Literal, if it's supposed to be metaphorical, please correct me in that. But I just thought about them. Like if we're kings and queens of blood and kings and queens, which is true, then I just kind of figured it'd probably be hard for anybody to imagine that it was good for us day one, day 2000, day 10,000 if we came from royalty, which we did, right?
Well, I don't know how the kings are doing in Africa right now, but D, you cannot deny the fact that this country offers more opportunities for people who look like you and I.
Okay,
You
so
can't deny that. You
let me
can't deny that.
let me ask you something. You guys, I see y'all questions, so y'all don't think I'm not seeing your questions. I am.
And by the
So
way, may I?
sure.
Okay, okay, let me again give more context, right? And how I arrived at my worldviews. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was 5 years old, my mother, who was born in Mississippi, this is also in the forward. My mother was born in 1952. So I was born to an unwed teenage mother. Okay, I was born in Inglewood, California. Okay, so when I was 5 years old, she showed me a picture of Emmett Till's dead, bloated body in his casket. And even though I was five, it shook me to my core. So when Alex Haley wrote Roots, I begged my mother to go meet him. I stood in line the whole nine, right? I was all in on civil rights movement, right? I knew about the Black Panther Party, Huey, all of them, right? Frederick Douglass, all of them, okay? But then I did my own research, which, by the way, is another key area. When you meet a Black Democrat and you ask them why are you a Black Democrat, they always say that's what we do. My mom was Democrat, and all I hear is Republicans are racist. But when you meet a Black Republican, they always say I did my own research. Okay, so what I did was I did my own research when I got older. And by the way, my mother is unhappy about this. Okay, that's chapter two, the betrayal of my mother and fathers, plural. Okay, because that same mother who told me not to do what white people expected me to do, I couldn't wear a a Public Enemy T-shirt. Uh, I was raised in a very conservative household. The man who raised me was a military and law enforcement, LA County Deputy Sheriff. So I grew up in a very conservative household, and I feel betrayed that they support liberal policies and politicians that have been known to hurt Black people. Okay. So anyway, as I did my research, I was like, wait a second, Bull Connor was a Democrat.
Was actually a
Okay.
Democrat, but
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
same,
Our
yeah,
our current
same,
pres our current you can our current president was a Dixiecrat. Okay,
correct.
Democrat, Dixiecrat, synonymous. Governor George Wallace, segregation today, tomorrow, forever, was a Democrat. The Klan, Democrats. The Confederate, Democrat. So then I said, wait a second, they're saying the party switched. So on its face, I said, wait a second, you mean to tell me that the most racist Democrats joined the anti slavery party? That doesn't make sense. But okay, let me do more research. So I went to the government's website and I looked at who voted against the Voting Rights Act of 65 and the Civil Rights Act of 65 and the Voter Rights Act is 64, and every one of the Southern Democrats voted against it. And I said, okay, and I looked, and how many changed parties? Only one, Strom Thurmond. Okay.
Right.
And then, so when anyone ever says to me, when everyone says to me, oh, the party switched, I always say, prove it. There should be data points. That's just one data point. And by that theory, the idiot in the White House right now should be a Republican, but he's not.
Well, I
And
mean,
and George and George Wallace, I'm sorry, but and George Wallace was governor of Alabama until 1987 as a Democrat. The truth is, the Democrats, they don't want to own their racist history.
got you. And listen, everybody knows how I feel. Both parties are the same.
Yeah,
They're both the same. None of them
so,
care
so
for black people.
so I agree with you. So like in America, um, being black is typically choosing the lesser of two evils, and that's what we're constantly doing. And the lesser of two evils for me is the one that affords me the most opportunities.
Okay, so let's go back to this, and then I'm gonna get to some of these questions in here. So you don't think that we are victims, even in 2024, with the racism and discrimination that black people still go through, the police brutality and other factions of white supremacy on a daily basis? You don't think that we are victims? Okay, let me ask you a better question. Do you think we were victims during Black Wall Street?
Okay, so I'm not sure if you are misquoting me or missing the context.
Maybe I'm
So I
missing context.
so absolutely, the men and women who went through Black Wall Street, the men and women who went, our ancestors who lived through segregation and Jim Crow, the slave codes, everything, they were all victims.
Mhm.
I'm talking about a victim mentality. Okay. So, and we have case studies. There's analogies that we can look at. So, uh, not, and I don't want to talk about Jewish people, but I think they have found a nice balance of honoring their past, right? And it's not just the Holocaust. They were enslaved for 3,000 years in Egypt, right? They have found a nice balance of honoring their ancestors while not being victims today. I look at the Cuban people, right? So when Castro overthrew Batista in 1959, a million middle class Cubans fled Cuba with nothing. And by the turn of the century, that means a generation and a half, those Cubans created a bigger GDP than the country of Cuba because they rejected white liberal welfare policies and they kept their families intact. What ails Black America is it's huge, and that's why I believe white liberals are our mortal enemies. Do you know that half of Black people today don't get married?
Well, I would venture to say that all of them are our enemies. Okay, all of them, and
I'm sorry, you said not all or all?
I would say, okay, yeah, there's some, but say white people in general are the enemy of black people because of all this time that we have been here. Because we say, well, you're saying the white liberal is, basically giving us this victim mindset. Well, if the white conservative is so much better, why hasn't any of that balanced out for black people? Because let's get to this conversation about reparations.
Okay, may I address that, please, real quick?
Well, okay, maybe I could tie it in for you because
Okay.
my memory be bad. I'm getting old.
Me
Um,
too. I said I was born in 1970, D.
I was born a year after you. um, so I'm sure you know that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans or independents want black people to have reparations.
Okay.
So, what is your viewpoint on Black people wanting and now demanding our reparations, Black Americans?
Okay, so in my opinion, it's a layered approach. My answer is layered. So first and foremost, no, I'm against reparations for Black Americans, and here's why. I believe it will continue to steal our dignity the way the welfare system has the past 4 to 5 decades. Okay, and also, hold up, let me finish. And also, it doesn't address uh, the shortcomings that Black Americans have in creating generational wealth. Okay. So I think white liberals are so sinister that if I know this, I'm a Black kid born in a ghetto to a teenage mother. I know some white liberal who went to Harvard knows this. Okay. So uh, Arabs and East Indians, they circulate their dollars like 45 days. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Asians are next, I believe, 24 to 29 days. Jews are like 17 to 19 days. Black people, 6 hours.
Why do you think that is?
I'm sorry. Let me finish that thought because you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Tulsa. Back in 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District, that dollar circulated 18 months to 24 months
Right.
until white Democrats burnt it down. So I'm a advocate of acknowledging the horrible things our people went through, but I'm an advocate of pointing the finger in the right direction. So if you Google 1921, who was the mayor of Tulsa, Oklahoma? It was a Democrat. Okay. If you look at redlining in New Jersey in 19, I don't know, any year, and look at that city, it was a Democrat. So I'm not denying the horrible things that our people went through. I'm an advocate for pointing the finger in the right direction. So the reason why we don't recycle our dollars the way other communities do, because our families have been destroyed. So I'm a huge fan of Thomas Sowell and Bob Woodson. So Thomas Sowell talks about the hidden century, 1865 to 1965, right? Every metric in Black American life got better every decade, from infant mortality to education, literacy, uh, the gap in income between white men and Black men, and most importantly, two parent households. By 1965, it was completely flipped. We live in a nation where nearly 80% of black children are raised by their single mother. And I'm tired of white people and their black, and this you'll hear me say this over and over. I am tired of white people and their Black allies minimizing the role of Black fathers. I'm
Okay.
sick of it.
Okay, but let's stay with that of reparations. So you're saying no, because it's, I guess like it would be like a crutch for a lack of better words. Obviously you know why we are asking for reparations, right?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I understand that people um, who've been sold their victim mentality are suffering from post-traumatic slave syndrome, even though they don't know slaves, they weren't slaves, they don't know people who own slaves. It's somehow this traumatic stress syndrome is passed to us in our DNA. Okay, so I realize why they want that, but my point is, it's going to continue to rob us of our dignity because other cultures know what I just said. And those other
Okay, but
cultures, and
me,
those other cultures are those Africans that are moving here.
okay,
And
but okay, but because let's just stay right here. So you said us getting reparations is going to rob us of our dignity.
our
Okay,
dignity.
Uh, did it rob the Jews of their dignity?
Are you talking about other cultures
I'm
getting
talking about
reparations?
United States government under the Obama administration. Biden and Bernie Sanders felt that Jews, the older ones, should get reparations because they should not have to die in poverty. So were they robbed of their dignity? Because the reason they gave them the reparations was because they wanted them to have dignity. So how is it that the Jews are given a reparation, and nobody's mad about that. There's no dignity, and I'm just asking questions. No dignity issues involved, but when it comes to Black people, we are being robbed of our dignity. Let me say this before I give it to you. Black people, nothing is more undignifying, if that's a word, than to realize that the wealth gap that we have, and you know about the wealth gap that we have, it says it's going to take about 232 years, at least probably more than that now, to close it, mostly due to our ancestors not getting what they paid for the labor that was stolen from them. We're not able to pass down generational wealth. In addition to that of Jim Crow and a whole host of other things, we had all the Black Wall Streets and all the other townships that were burnt down. And I'm going to say this to you, Terrell, because you're a very smart guy, but there's no way that it was just all Democrats. And I'm not a Democrat, okay? I'm not a Democrat nor a Republican. You know, I just fail to believe that there was just Democrats in all those towns striking matches and burning up those towns. I believe that there was probably some Republicans there too. So if I could get you to answer, why is it that everybody else that gets a reparations check from this government, why aren't they undignified? But when it comes to us, because slavery is America's original sin that has never been atoned for. So why is it that we are considered to be undignified because we want our reparations?
Okay, so I'm going to assume, because I haven't looked into what you just said about Obama giving Jews checks, right? So I'm assuming, were those specific Jews actual Holocaust survivors?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
And did it take place here?
Okay, so they were Holocaust survivors. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a slave survivor. You're not a slave survivor.
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm saying I am. I obviously I'm a tender young thing, so I wasn't on the plantation.
and by the way, because you're saying a lot, and I want to remember what you're saying. And by the way,
write it down, brother.
And by the way, I would disagree with Jews getting checks. Okay.
Okay. So, but
for the Holocaust, because we didn't create the Holocaust.
Right. But are they undignified because they got those checks? Do you see them as undignified? Even before I told you they got reparations checks, did you see them as an undignified people?
Well, there's 2 points there. Mm-hmm. One, America shouldn't have cut them checks,
but they did.
Two, they were actual Holocaust survivors. They lived. Right. They lived through concentration camps.
Okay, let me ask you this.
I've never set foot on a plantation.
Okay, me either. I was in New Orleans about 2 years ago, almost at this point, and they have plantation tours, and I was like, I refuse to pay to go on a goddamn plantation. But nevertheless, brother, you know that we got plantations here in America they call prisons, and they hold predominantly Black people in those penitentiaries, and those are like plantations. And so I say that I'm a survivor because we know that the trauma that was exacted upon our ancestors on those plantations, they never got mental health therapy. They never got checks or anything else, land, any of the stuff that was promised to them. They carried that trauma even to us in this very day. And I say that, okay, go ahead.
Let me respond.
Sure.
Okay, so I would be for reparations if it happened for the people who were slaves, who were promised their 40 acres and a mule. So do you know why that promise was taken back?
Yes.
Why? How?
Andrew Johnson.
There you go.
Yes, and by the way, on the special field orders.
Yeah, so Special Field Order 15 was a proclamation by General Sherman.
Yes.
Okay. And it was like 3 states, three southern states. So back then, if you were president, if you were Republican, your vice president was Democrat. So what happened was Abraham Lincoln, who gets far too much credit, was assassinated, and then his Democrat vice president became president, and the Democrat president took back the 40 acres and a mule.
Okay, let's do this. Let's pretend, and I'm not being funny. Let's pretend that Kermit the Frog was the president and Miss Piggy was the vice president. Do we still get our reparations? Because my thing is this, and let me ask the other question. If our ancestors got that 40 acres and a mule, let's say they died, what would have happened to those mules and those acres?
They would have been passed on to their children.
Right. Stop right there, brother. Stop right there. We're getting somewhere. So they've been passed on. So that was denied to our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it affects us, because we were robbed completely time and time and time and decade and decade and decade. And even to this day, we are robbed of our ancestral land. Are you familiar with the Gullah Geechee in South Carolina?
I am not.
Okay, so there's a Gullah Geechee people, and they go obviously way back through slavery. Now, they're Black people. It's on the coast of South Carolina that own. In fact, there was a case of an elderly woman. She's gone now. She was in her 90s, and she died fighting a giant corporation, a white-owned corporation who lied on her, who encroached upon her land, who tied her up in court, trying to take her land that was in her family since the Civil War. Finally, the court said, leave her alone. But do you know they built all around her property, and the only thing that was left was her property? And that happened last year. So when I think about we as Black people aren't owed reparations because we aren't slaves, it's still going on to this day. Do you know that? I heard Joe Biden talk about, we got the infrastructural plan. We're going to stop, the running freeways through Black communities. Why y'all running freeways still in 2024 through Black communities? They're still doing that. So the things that when I say we, our ancestors experienced during slavery, we're still experiencing now. Maybe not to that degree. It's just morphed into other things. Take case in point. After slavery, when, we could no longer legally be held on plantations. Are you familiar with the convict leasing program?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It just morphed over time to keep Black people enslaved in one way, shape, or form. But I will concede this to you. I will concede this. There's a lot of things that we as Black Americans should be doing. And you talked about that dollar circulating, through everybody's community. There's things we could be doing. We make up about the 9th or 11th largest most, I guess, wealthiest community. So we'd be like a country. We'd be like the wealthiest country as Black Americans if we kept most of that money. We know that we have could be $2 trillion in the Black American community every year, but we give 97% of that away. So yes, there's things that we can be doing. But I think we also need to keep in mind the things that we do try to do. That bird that has a wing of the left and the right, but is white. Listen, I wasn't even trying to rhyme. It rears its ugly head, and it continues to get in the way of progress of Black people. So when I go back, I'm gonna give it to you. When I think about reparations, and I hear there's a lot of people who do not think Black people should get reparations. When I hear that, I'm like, and I'm not saying this about you, Terrell. Clearly, you're not well versed on the history of Black Americans in this country and all the hell that our people have gone through and all the hell that our people are still going through. As Farrakhan said, yeah, the Jews went through the Holocaust, but what Black people have gone through in this country will make a brass monkey shed a tear. Not to deduce what everybody else has gone through, but at least everybody else has been compensated via some sort of reparations for the things that they have gone through. I just told you a couple of minutes ago, the United States government gave Jewish Holocaust victims a check, but they'll sit up and tell Black people, you ain't getting no checks from us. We don't go, why should we have to do that? But then continuously, and whether it's Joe Biden or it's George Bush, they all believe that police should have more power. And we know what police disproportionately do and who they do it to. They do that to Black people.
Will you please allow me to
Oh,
jump in? Because
absolutely.
I am writing down what you're saying because you're saying a
Hmm.
lot. So to
Sometimes.
move on from reparations, I'll concede one thing to you. I would be for reparations if it was paid by Democrats or the descendants of those people who did those things to our people. And then a while ago, you said, I'm sure Republicans did it too. So, coming from someone who does their research, does their work, you just can't say, I'm sure. Get on the Googles and because Tulsa, Oklahoma wasn't the only burning
Oh no,
destruction.
it was plenty of them.
So find one on the calendar, find one, and then search who ran that municipality. Okay, so I would concede if descendants from those people who did those have them pay reparations. Okay, and then you said something about man, I forgot what you said. It'll come back to me. I
Right, get
told
a
you
pencil and paper.
I do. I have it. Uh, but also let me just say something in general. Okay. Um, So I absolutely love Black people. I love my people. Sometimes I think I love them more than others. Okay. And then also sometimes I think there's something wrong with me. But then I saw, she's passed on about 4 or 5 years. I saw an interview with Toni Morrison,
Hmm.
and the interviewer asked her, why doesn't she write white people? And her response was, I do my writings, I'm paraphrasing, as if white people do not exist. And that's how I live my life. If you look for racism, you're going to see it. Uh, if I come across a racist, I take my talent down the street. I have bought 9 houses in my life, and when I showed up, the mortgage broker, the banker, the real estate agent, all they cared about was my ability to close because it's a commission based business. And if I came across someone who didn't want to do business with me because I'm Black, I just took my resources down the street. And I know uh, about 20 years ago, it hit me because I was raised by a civil servant. I was raised by a father and a mother. Okay. The man who raised me met my mother when I was 2, and he married her when I was 8. Okay. He was a career civil servant, Air Force for 4 years. He carried mail for 2, and he was LA deputy sheriff for almost 30 years. We never talked about money. We talked about being safe and all that kind of stuff, right? The
Hmm.
government's giving out good jobs. When I turned 18, he took me to the post office, the gas company, and Edison. Okay. So instead, I wanted to be a firefighter. I went through a fire academy, did well, graduated, because I was told that that was a safe place for me as a Black man. Okay, and then but in my entire 11-week academy, I heard you're Black, you're Black, you're Black, and all kind of Black jokes because this was like in '93, a recession. Affirmative action was a hot topic. Then
Hmm.
I got hired. Then I got hired as a reserve firefighter. Okay, same thing, Black, 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 Black. So then, because reserve firefighters don't get paid, I was waiting tables in a fine dining restaurant, and a Black stockbroker came in the restaurant. He said, "Why are you working here? You're a smart kid." And I said, "I don't know." I was all of 23. I was like, "I don't know." Uh, and then he pulled out his HP financial calculator. He was a broker with Smith Barney. And he said, "Do you know 1 plus 1?"
I didn't do. Oh, there you go. I was like, what happened to Terrell? Hold on a second. There you go. It disappeared. Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So then he said, 1 plus 1 equals 2, no matter what color you are, and compounding interest doesn't care that you're Black. Okay. So then I went into the financial world. That's where I met your brother, Walter, who likes to quote me and not cite the source.
Get
And
him.
And what I learned in corporate America is they didn't care what color I was. All they cared is it could I make money, and I flourished, and I learned something, and I had an epiphany 20 years ago. And I say this not to disparage white men, but to lift up black men. And by the way, I say black with a distinction. I'm not here for people of color. I'm not here for black and brown. I'm here for black men because the left always wants to put us in the same group as if we share the same experiences as Hispanics or the LGBTQ. Our journey in this country is unique, unlike no one else. So for this is for black men, okay? And I want them to know that white men are not as talented as we are led to believe they are. This whole country is designed for their success. You ever see a lion raised in captivity, right? And before they introduce it to the wild, there's different stages because that lion has been fed their entire life. They've been spoon fed their entire life. They can't just let them out into the wild because they'll get killed. That's white men.
Oh,
'Cause-
oh, for sure. We agree on that.
And,
We
and so that frustrates me when I want young brothers to like, you don't have to listen to people who tell you, like, I've never walked into a building and said, oh, there's white people in there. I'm not going in there. What I've
I
learned,
have.
well, you shouldn't. I
I
have learned,
I have.
I have learned that when you have your stuff together, the right type of white people will be drawn to a black man. I
What's the
can put
what's the
on
what's the what's the right type of white people?
uh, usually the white people who are the wrong type are the liberals or the trailer park.
So again, you're basically going to die on the hill that the white conservative is non-threatening and has been non-threatening to Black Americans.
What I can tell you is my own personal experience, D.
Got you. Got
Uh, the people who have treated me worse in my life have been white liberals, black people, and if I had to say this, Mexican men living in Southern California.
And let me
The,
say
the,
this, and I saw you guys, some people asking, what is his wife? She is a sister. His wife is
oh
Black.
yeah. So here's the deal. See what she. I didn't see the quote, but every time someone meets me, they think my wife is white. Okay.
Well, why do you think
So,
they think that?
huh?
Why do you think they think that?
Because they tell me that.
I know, but why do you think they're asking? They're saying that? Are they
Oh,
just,
oh,
yeah?
oh, because how I move. So, uh, like I said, we moved to Altaloma, which is now everyone calls it Rancho Cucamonga, in 1979, right? And I was one of five. It's in the book. I was one of five black kids.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of five black kids in my entire grade school. I was in fourth grade. I was called nigger every day of the week. Okay. Got in fights every day of the week. Never got suspended because Mrs. Steinecker knew what I was dealing with. So I come in 1979, fourth grade. It's all white boys out here. And so I'm all in on baseball, skateboarding, and punk rock music. Okay. So here's what happened by ninth grade. All the brothers start moving in. So I go from being called nigger every day of the week to being called Oreo, sellout, all kinds of stuff, right? So obviously, up until then, I only dated white girls. When in Rome, there wasn't too many sisters out here. Then one day, my white girlfriend introduced me to a group of her friends, and one of them was my future wife. And I thought that was the prettiest black girl I had ever seen. And I spent the entire night looking over my white girlfriend's shoulder at this beautiful black girl and her lips and everything. Okay. So we started dating when we were 16 years old. We got married when we were 24. Okay. So yes, I love black people. My wife is black. However, I don't believe that black women have taken the responsibility in their role in the decline in the black family.
Uh-oh. And great, Nate. How you doing? Uh, a few people are saying I saw some people say maybe you have an axe to grind due to trauma of some of the things that you've described as a kid, growing up in Rancho Cucamonga, um, and then having the influx of black people moving from Los Angeles, because that's basically where they were coming from. Do you think that some of that is trauma based? Your ideologies?
Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. I don't know how many different ways I can say, I love black people. When I shared that little anecdote, um, that was more about, my mind, where I come from, uh, and talking about, my wife is black, because people always think she's white. They always think she's white. Most of my friends are black, but most of the men who saw something special in me and mentored me and said, "Hey, come with us," I have to tell the truth. Most of them were white men. That's just the truth. Excuse me, they're white conservative men. Those white men at American Express that I was told that would never accept me, they took me in with open arms. The white men that, and that's why I'm not as enamored with the fire industry as most people are. Those white men who worked in the fire service, they were racist, and nepotism ran through. As a matter of fact, in my academy, I was, out of 35 of us, I was the only black guy, and they tried to get me kicked out by starting to fight with me.
And guess what? It's still that way.
Oh yeah, over 90% of firefighters in America, um, are white men. They operate with impunity. No one ever questions it.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I mean, we've heard about the plethora of lawsuits that was started by black firefighters, or for being hazed and just messed with, for lack of better words, by white firefighters. So we know those things are still going on. So then that kind of takes us back to the victim mentality. So is it really a victim mentality, or is it we're really victims?
well, I don't think well, I know the FBI statistics do not show that police are hunting black men. They're just simply not.
Okay,
Out of the
so I would agree that not some of them, but I don't think that's what they are doing. They're on the hunt per se. But what would you say about the interaction once they do come in contact with black men?
Okay, so
Why does that go from, hey sir, your tail light is broken, to now you being carried by what, six, or
okay,
judged
so
by 12? How
yeah,
did that happen?
okay, so I have a chapter in the book entitled "Police."
Hmm.
Okay. So I realize that I am super fortunate. I was raised by a cop. Okay. So when I get pulled over, I got pulled over once a month. There was a time I got pulled over once a month. I was driving an S550, tinted windows on 22-inch rims, and my office was in Beverly Hills. I got pulled over once a month. But more than twice, the cop asked me for my business card. And so, and I teach my children this. So, their number one job when they get pulled over is to make that cop feel comfortable and bring their asses home. Okay.
Okay, so wait. And so it's
Yeah.
the person that's getting pulled over's job to make the cop feel comfortable?
Yeah. We can't be naive. We're this color. Okay. We can't be naive. So, listen. So, hold up. Hold up. So, I tell my children it's not your day in court and it's not debate class. if that cop gives you, I'm answering your question about interaction.
Mm-hmm.
If that cop gives you a lawful order, just do it. As you're being pulled over, windows are going down, hands at 10 and 2. Don't grab for your wallet or your registration. You say it's in the glove compartment. You mind if I get it? There's things that I think all parents should tell their children how to act, because let's not kid ourselves. Um, I don't think the best and the brightest people are always going into local law enforcement. It's not like the man who raised me, civil service jobs, because, and here I go again, because FDR, everyone loved FDR, right? But the Great New Deal excluded uh, black people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the gateway to the middle class was civil servants, whether they worked on buses, trains, or they became cops or mail carriers, right? So I'm very fortunate. So when I get pulled over by a cop and I see him walking up in the rearview mirror, I don't instantly get mad. I think of dad.
Okay, so
Okay,
let's just because set off a beehive in the comment section.
it's okay.
I know. I think you built for this. You built for this. Okay.
I I love black people so much that I'm willing to go through this. And I
Okay.
know that 80 to 90% of black people disagree with me, but we are under attack. We are under attack. Since I was a child,
Under attack from who?
okay, I'm gonna be a broken record. We are under attack from white liberals and their black allies. And their black allies are people who have ushered policies into our communities that have hurt our families. D, when I was 16 years old, we were 12% of the population. We're still 12% of the population. Okay. The Planned Parenthood was called the Negro Project.
Eugenics.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Since
So
when Roe v. Wade passed, since Roe v. Wade passed, there's been 22 million black babies aborted.
okay, can I ask you a question? Okay. Let me write this down because I got. Let me see. Let me write this down. Hold on a second. Hopefully, I remember. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the police. Us making the cop feel comfortable.
Yes.
And you said, just do everything you can, don't argue, rather, have your day in court, this, that, and the other. When I say the name of Philando Castile, what comes to mind?
A victim.
Victim. And he was doing absolutely nothing. In fact, he was a passenger.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you also said that your father, was in law enforcement. So I'm sure you are familiar with the term de-escalation. So why is it that it's our job to make sure that the cop feels comfortable? Why is he coming up to the car uncomfortable in the first place?
Okay, so I want to go home at night. I want to go home in my car, not a body bag.
Okay, so stop
So,
right there.
so
Well,
let
hold
me finish.
on. Okay,
So my
because I want to build. Okay, you want to
okay.
go home. You don't want to go home. No body bag, and neither do I. I don't have a dangerous job. I don't think. Um, but if you stopping me for a tail light, where's the danger in that?
I mean, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. My point is, it doesn't matter why you're getting pulled over. So like, for example, if a cop pulls me over and he asks me if this is my car, which happens, or where am I going, where am I coming from, I will tell the cop I know
But
my
why you
constitution.
need to know all that if I just got a tail light out? Why you need to know? You digging at this point? I'm just saying, because I've been pulled over as a black woman. I used to wear my hair short, and I've been pulled over like a couple of times. I've actually seen twice the cop did a U-turn, and I wasn't speeding or nothing. And pulled me over. And when they saw I was a woman, and I had both times. That one time I had my daughter in the car, and the other time I had my brother and his friends taking them to the movies. In fact, I pulled into the parking stall of the movie to drop them off, and he blocks me in, talking about, oh, I fit the description. He thought I was, and I'm like, what you think I was, man? So so what I'm saying is, you digging at this point. If you pulling me over for a broken tail light, Right? Hey, ma'am, sir, your tail light is out. Here go the citation. Get it fixed or whatever it is. The protocol is. But to come where you coming from, what you doing? What's in the car? Why that wasn't your initial suspicion of me, or do you just assume because I'm black that I must got something nefarious going on other than just having a broken tail light?
Okay, so you're changing the conversation. So I'm not denying the fact that that happens. It also happens to other races too. I already said that the best and brightest that law enforcement has to offer is not always going into local law enforcement nowadays.
It's been
Okay.
that, but brother, you know,
I,
and you know the history of police because you said your father was one. You know, the police officers been that since the plantation because that's where they come from in America. The patty rollers, the slave patrol. That's what it's predicated off of. So they've never had law enforcement has never seen black people as favorable. And I know you talk about the Democrats, which is true. Joe Biden, he said, I'm funding, no worries, I'm funding the police even more. And every president, as far back as you can think of, has funded the police, whether it was Republican or Democrat. So there's never been a favorable view of black people. Now, I know, you know, my brother, who is your homie, he's got a copious amount of stories wearing his suit being pulled over. So it's like, what about me in a suit and you pull me over? It makes you think you're going to go home in a body bag.
okay, so we're talking about interactions. I'm not denying the fact that cops use a broken tail light or not signaling or an illegal lane change to pull someone over. Okay. And just, I want to back up. So if a cop asks me where I'm going, where I've been, I will say, why is that relevant to how you pulled me over? Okay. But I'm also not going to like get belligerent and complain or accuse him of pulling me over just because I'm black. I
Well,
don't
I
do
think,
that.
but, yeah, but I think it's unfair to say that most black people who are pulled over say, "Oh, you did it because I'm black." If you tell me you pulling me over for a broken tail light, let's deal with that. Now you digging all up in my business. You looking for something now, right? Because now you probably saw that it was somebody black. Okay, maybe I could find something on them. And we, of course, you know, like you said, they're afraid, of which I venture to say, why are you even in the police force if you're afraid because you were, you know, dealing with people? But I mean, it's like y'all they have these preconceived notions of who they're dealing with. You know,
Well, we're not going to disagree. This whole started. This topic started when I told you that I raised my children that when they get pulled over, their number one job is to make that cop feel comfortable, and I don't have a problem with that. There's no ego. It's not your day in court. It's not debate class. Just follow his lawful instructions. If he goes sideways, you can remind him of your constitutional rights. You can do that. Okay. And I'm
does it
only,
work?
and even when BLM launched, right? BLM launched in 2012, right? Off the end of Trayvon Martin,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so I went to so I was off BLM in 2012. I went to their website specifically to see what they thought about police reform, and it was all about more training and more money. And again, I'm a broken record. The left thinks that every problem could be solved with money. Okay, I believe now here I believe that cops. My opinion on policing is way out there because cops not living where they work started from racism. Chief Parker, LAPD, would hire Klansmen, right? Chief Parker gave us Daryl Gates. Okay,
Right.
that was Daryl Gates' ascension to chief of police. He was Parker's driver, so he would hire Klansmen from Alabama or wherever to work LAPD, and then they would live on the outskirts because they would do their dirt and then go home. I live in Altaloma. Every day I see a cop get in his cruiser on his bike on the 210 freeway heading to the to LA to play cops and robbers with the lives of black men, and I don't like it. So it's a silly analogy, but just go with me. So can you imagine in the 1800s if Wyatt Earp every morning rode into Tombstone? Tombstone residents would say, "Get the hell out of here! You don't live here." So when cops don't live where they work, we lose that humanity factor because his kids don't know each other. Uh, he pulls over my son. He doesn't know my son's mother. All those things, right? So there's a humanity factor that's lost, and also uh, there's a money factor. If your paycheck comes from the local taxpayers, that city should have right of first refusal. You should buy your house there. You should buy your gas, all your use tax, your groceries, everything. So the money is recycled into that particular city.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. I want to go back to
And,
the. Go ahead.
and I believe a cop's childhood history should be relevant. If he hates his mother, he doesn't get a badge.
Oh
If he,
no,
if,
listen. I
if
I totally agree with all that you said, but I have a question for you. And then we're gonna go back to
okay,
this, Negro Project eugenics thing. Uh, so when black officers, let's say they come from the neighborhood, right? Let's say they grew up in Watts, and they become a police officer, and they're assigned to Beverly Hills, where it's probably predominantly not black people there. Do you think those officers go in there and rock 'em, sock 'em, and Rambo and walking tall and talking tough with those residents?
no.
Why?
Probably because there's a certain level of how people move and certain expectations. I just mentioned that my office for 6 years was in Beverly Hills. I was on Camden, one block west of Rodeo Drive, and I got pulled over once a month because the car I was driving, which is really surprising because no matter what color you are, if you're driving $100,000 car, I promise you, the work ain't in the trunk. It's a brother driving an '89 Civic with the work in the trunk. But anyway, I knew that, but when I got pulled over, I was like, "What's up, guys? What's going on?" And then they always treated me kindly. I didn't get any tickets. Uh,
But the question was, do black cops go to those neighborhoods and act austere with those people?
no, because how those people move.
How do they move differently than they do in, let's say, Watts?
Okay, so I would venture to say that the black man who lives in Watts has been influenced by the sub-black culture that
Okay,
says that says, hey, if you want to wear a hoodie into a bank, go ahead and do it.
what's wrong with wearing a hoodie into a bank?
I'm not gonna do it.
Why not?
I tell you what, I'm gonna give you a story that's
Wait,
in
wait,
the
wait,
book
wait. But no, wait, wait. We get to the story, but why wouldn't you wear a hoodie into? What's wrong with that?
because I don't want to be stereotyped.
About
It,
like
it,
how?
it, it,
It's a
it's
hoodie,
the, it's the same reason why your brother wears a suit every place we go.
but do he still be getting pulled over though?
I mean, everyone gets pulled over.
So that's what I'm saying. What's wrong with a hoodie? Okay, so let's go back to this because we getting somewhere. We Terrell and I having a conversation. It's all love, I promise you. So the people in Watts move differently than the people in Beverly Hills. And he said the black people in Watts are have been influenced by the culture,
I said the sub-black culture.
sub black culture. Okay, thank you, sub black culture. Do you think it has anything to do with a little bit of racism, discrimination, institutional systemic racism, as to, for one, why Watts even looks and operates a lot differently than that of Beverly Hills? Might that have something to do with it?
Well, racism is everywhere. It's everywhere. We can't, there's always we're never going to be a society where there's no racism. If we were a society of all black people, we would find some way to discriminate, whether it's colorism, light black, light skin, dark skin, short, tall, fat, skinny. It you have to determine that, okay, this should exist, but it's not going to affect me. It's not going to deter me. I'm still moving. And I feel sorry for anyone who doesn't think that way. And I'll give you an example. So may I tell my story, please?
Sure.
So I was for our sales territory, Southern California and Hawaii. I was financial advisor of the year for American Express. Okay. Um, and I had a large check hit. I messed up, or Amex messed up, but my direct deposit didn't go through. Okay. So I'm leaving Ontario Airport. My entertainment client is leaving LAX. Okay. And that Kevin Hart joke, like celebrities party different, he wasn't lying. Okay. So I knew the weekend in Dallas was on me. So my entire flight to Dallas, I'm nervous. I need more money. Okay. So I pull into the hotel and I realized that I'm not going to say their name, but the bank that handled Amex's payroll was across the courtyard. I checked in. I was still wearing my suit and tie. I walked across the courtyard with my check, my ID, and my business card. And I introduced myself and I said, I'm in town traveling, blah, 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 blah. Can you call Amex and tell them I'm here? I need my check cash. So I'm out of state where I do not bank. And I'm standing right here. Okay. About an hour later, the bank manager called my hotel room and said, come get your money, sir. Okay. And it was a large check. So, closer to $15,000, right? And I know I was able to execute that because of how I walked into that room. And then when I'm also very cheap, right? Uh, I'm going through TSA with closer to like $13,000 in my carry-on, and I forget I have it, and the TSA agent sees the money in the X-ray. 4 or 5 guys asked me to go into a room, and they pulled the money out, and I said, "Oh, guys, I understand. Here's my bank stuff. Here's the receipt. Here's my pay stub. Here's the receipt. That's where the money came from." I was out of that room in less than 2 minutes.
Okay. So, and I'm glad that all worked out for you. And I mean that sincerely, but that's not the norm, dear brother.
It doesn't.
That's not the norm.
So I don't have to be. I already told you and your audience. I come from I come from an unwed teenage mother. I was born in the ghetto. I grew up eating syrup sandwiches, sugar water, and government cheese. I didn't meet my biological father till I was 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If I could do it, they
Ah,
can do it.
ah.
And the reason why I was able to do these things is because, again, I'm a broken record, because I ignored white liberals and their black allies. I am not a victim, and there's not one room in this world that I cannot walk into.
Okay. Well, and you and I have had this conversation before. And I would say that is exceptional of you because let's keep it a buck. That's not the norm. It's just not. And I get it. The people have different experiences or whatever, but that is not the norm for Black people in America. But I want to go back to something you said in regards to, the Negro Project with the abortion and stuff, predominantly for Black people. And we know that that's not a policy of the Republican Party, right? They're trying to ban it completely in a lot of states. Do you think they're doing that with Black people in mind? Like they're wanting to save Black people, Black babies?
Um, so I have an opinion about abortion, not just in the black community.
Well, no, I'm just asking, going back to what you said. I was and I agree with you. It is something that the Democrats do tout. But do you think that Republicans are not wanting that to happen to Black babies?
So I can say this: I have never heard a white Republican or white Christian or a black Republican ever advocate for us murdering our babies, our unborn. I've never heard that before. So I have to say that they are doing more to bring black children into this world than white liberals are.
I think that's by proxy, though.
Margaret Sanger, and by the way, Margaret Sanger in the Negro Project is, and I write about this, is a large reason. This, now your audience is really going to get upset with me. I'm not a fan of MLK.
Oh,
I
listen,
don't.
we well versed on that. We already had that conversation 50, 11 times. So my audience ain't
Okay.
gonna get mad. They already know.
I don't think he's worthy of a holiday. I don't honor him. I think Malcolm X was way more of an honorable man. I write about MLK in my book. You know, he was arrested 29 times, right?
Mhm.
Google MLK mugshots. They're all pristine, hair in place. His mugshots are not indicative of the civil rights movement that included fire hoses and billy clubs and all that stuff, right? He showed up when the beatdown was done and the camera showed up. Okay. There's even a picture of him doing why, how was the photographer in the cell with him?
I mean, no, I totally understand
So
though that.
he walked Margaret Sanger into the black family.
Well, actually, Margaret Sanger was around way before Martin Luther King
Oh
was.
yeah, 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 yeah.
She determined that 30 years before you talk
Yeah,
about the award that she gave him, 30 years before he was even on the scene, she had determined that it was going to be a Negro pastor because he would be more trusted in the black community. So it actually, she was obviously there before him.
agreed. Yeah. And then, he was the recipient of the first annual Margaret Sanger Award, right?
Correct.
And then we can even give him a pass. Or maybe I mean, he was a smart guy. I doubt he wasn't aware of her eugenics philosophy and what she thought of black people because she was
Well, a
vocal
lot
about
of them actually, a lot of them, when I say Negro leaders, that's what they want to call them. A lot of them were on board with the Negro Project because they felt like black people who weren't, and it was, quote, a credit to the race, really probably shouldn't multiply. So a lot of them were on board with that. Yeah, I understand Ida B. Wells, Booker T. Washington, a whole host of them back then. They were okay with that. So that is not rare. I'm trying to see what else here. They eating you up, brother. I'm gonna tell you. I want to say this. This is Brother Terrell's first interview. Um, so you know, it's a growing experience, if you will. And we're here just to kind of understand why you wrote the book of blood, the blood of kings and slaves. Um, I just know I've read quite a few books. Um, and I don't a lot of books that I read, I don't always agree with everything that I read, but I'll say, that's interesting because I think that's kind of the beauty of books, right? Because you're in learning of other people's opinions. You don't have to agree with it, but I'm one of those people that can say, okay, well, that's interesting. But I also say too, Terrell's viewpoints aren't new, especially in regards to black people. Because I saw a few people say, is he trying to be Jesse Lee Peterson and
no. Okay, hold on.
Carson and Candace Owens and
Can I address that?
absolutely.
Okay, so that's chapter 7, uh, where I take a critical assessment of the Republican Party and Black conservatives. I'm not a fan of Candace Owens. I do not like how she attacked George Floyd. Jesse Lee Peterson is a buffoon. Uh, I think Black people should show Ben Carson a little more respect than they do. Uh, the
Why
guy
is
grew up,
that?
huh?
Why is that?
The guy comes from poverty and he created the first brain surgery on an infant while still in the womb. Okay. And just because,
Can I ask you this? Then how did he end up being a Secretary of HUD?
uh,
Why wasn't he made like the attorney, the Surgeon General, or something like that? Why HUD?
okay, so that's okay. That's a different conversation. You don't like his appointment that has nothing to do with his accomplishments and
Oh,
where
no,
he
no,
came.
no. I'm not taking away from his accomplishments, but I'm like, what surgeon? Very accomplished. I'm not ever going to take that away from Ben Carson.
Okay. So I agree with you. Maybe he could have got a different appointment, but from where I'm sitting, it looks like people um, don't like black people don't like Ben Carson because he rides with Trump.
I don't even know if it's necessary that he rides with Trump. You know what it is for me with Ben Carson? In what you just said about him being a surgeon, done some things that has never been done before, it almost seems like he was dumbed down under Trump. That and I don't, you know what I'm saying? It seems like he was just like kind of just there. Like if I didn't know any of that stuff about him and his, historical surgeries and all that, I would just think, who is this guy? Because to me, like he like just kind of like played himself short to be up under white people. I don't know. It's just kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Ben Carson, but the Candace Owen things, like I'm not a fan of Candace Owens. She's gotten better with her delivery over the years, but let's not forget she's new to the political right. Okay, she ran a Never Trumper website, all that kind of stuff. She was anti-Trump, all that stuff. Okay, I don't like how she attacked George Floyd. It felt like she made a business decision, and she must not own a mirror because most black. I've never met a black person who likes Candace Owens, so I don't know who she's trying to uplift, and that's why people think she's doing the bidding of white supremacists. If she was a salesperson, because this is all sales, if she was a salesperson, she would be fired because she's missing the mark.
Do you know who else is new to the political right?
Are you gonna say Donald Trump? Um, I don't know. I guess, yeah. I remember. I don't have the exact year.
How
Uh,
about 2016, 15, 14?
okay.
I'm just saying.
So, I, I want to dispel any other stereotypes or thoughts. My Republican or my conservative values and onto the right. And by the way, people don't think I'm conservative because of my work. I left the financial industry over a decade ago, and I own a streetwear brand. I manufacture skateboards and apparel for guys and girls. So when people see my website, they think I'm a white guy. As a matter of fact, this business was started by two black dudes and two Mexicans, right? Um, so I first identified with, and it's in the book. I first identified with the Republican Party when I was 9 years old.
Mhm.
I mentioned to you that when I was five, seeing Emmett Till's body shook me to my core. I begged my mother to go meet Alex Haley, all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
Um, I was 9 years old, living on Prairie and Century, right across the street from the Forum. Okay. And I remember Jimmy Carter was our president, and I thought he was an idiot. Okay. And as I became older, and I voted in my first election in 1988, and I voted for George Bush one. I forget HW or W, can't remember, but just George Bush.
W.
And that's when I first learned of Joe Biden, Al Gore, Richard Gephardt, Michael Dukakis, Gary Hart, and it was Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, who was putting black men in jail for because their rap lyrics. Okay, and then I hate the fact that Joe Biden has clear cognitive decline because people are losing sight that he's always been a dim-witted, racist man. Okay, he was a segregationist until 19. I can't understand because he spoke at the NAACP in Vegas yesterday.
Mhm.
I can't understand how black people support him. He was a
Well,
segregationist in 1978. Uh, he said the N word on the as you know.
yeah, he did, but I don't. I'm not a Joe Biden fan, but I always like to give that proper context. Should he have said the word? Absolutely not.
He was reading someone else's words, but
Correct.
most decent people will say N word.
Right, and he said, yeah, I don't know if they even knew that was
He
the
loved
N word back then, but
yeah.
he
We
said
don't
it
need no
twice
more.
actually. He said it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he said we don't need no more nigger big shots
right.
or no more nigger. He said nigger with such
No,
enthusiasm.
I heard it. I agree. Um, I agree that he should not have said that. Um, And it's always, or it hasn't always been my take, because I always tell you I was a Democrat as well. But then when you get more knowledge, then you're supposed to move differently. So I don't cut for either one of them, the Republicans or the Democrats, because we know that neither party has made any, like, because we know that the Republicans have been in power, right? They've been in power before. Would you say that, whether it's on the federal, state, local level, they have had some power, right?
Of course.
So if and I want to take it a step back, that they're in love with Black people, but if they are better for Black people, why haven't they legislated to make the lives of Black people better? Because let's say they say, aha, it's the Democrats that made Black people's lives hell. Now we're in power. We're going to make some legislation to, make the lives of, not even if it's better, but easier, right? We're not going to legislate that we give cops more money, so that they can do more of the same. And I'm just speaking with Black people because, I speak to Black people. So why haven't Republicans made the lives of Black people better or easier, since the Democrats, and I agree with you, the Democrats are not the friends of Black people, but since the Democrats are the boogeyman of Black people, why haven't Republicans, been the answer?
So I'm not sure what specific legislation you would
Or
want.
any legislation,
Let me-
any of them.
Okay, so
Let's take some crime bills, right? Just let's stay with the crime bills. Joe Biden has said, I am the author of every major and minor crime bill since 1976. Okay,
proudly.
Proudly. So within 1976 to 2024, has there not been some Republican power, whether it was in the House, the Senate, the presidency?
Well, didn't Trump pass the First Step Act?
Yeah, but I mean, letting 2 or 3 Negroes out of jail a year. I mean, come on now, brother. Listen. I'm not mad at the First Step Act, but I'm saying, like, overturning some of these crime bills. That was.
And by the way, he let people out of prison that Obama passed on.
I totally agree with you. I listen. I agree. Obama was not a friend of Black people. Never has been, never will be. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, from the time that Joe Biden was writing those crime bills, why didn't I'm gonna say just one Republican with some power, a Speaker of the House, a president, somebody say, you know what? Joe Biden been giving Black people hell since 1976. What we're going to do is make a bill to undo the crime bills that disproportionately target Black people. And in fact, a lot of those crime bills that Joe Biden wrote purposely targeted Black people. So why hasn't a Republican come along and say, hey, it's not right. We're going to change it so Black people can, get the same treatment a white man, Hunter Biden, would get for getting caught with cocaine, instead of like he does when he's caught with crack.
Do you realize that the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Act of 1965 only passed because of Republican support?
Okay, we're gonna get
to.
You know what? You making me write most stuff down, brother. I'm gonna write that down. Okay. But why? Why do you think that is? That they have not said, Republicans said, let Black people go. Let's do some legislation to free Black people from Joe Biden's nonsense. Why hasn't one done that?
I don't know the answer, and I don't know if that hasn't been done. But I do know when the crime bill
hasn't.
Okay, so I mean, I'll concede that. But remember, I said that being Black in America quite often is picking the lesser of two evils. Okay. So neither party is perfect for Black people. Okay. But I do know that there's been tons of sociology studies done where they write down values. They do a T-chart and they write down values and beliefs and worldviews. And Black Americans overwhelmingly, when there's no labels, Black Americans overwhelmingly fall on the political right. But once those labels of Democrat and Republicans get placed, then they say, "Oh, I'm off that." Okay. Another reason, you mentioned Ida B. Wells. I come from the school of Frederick Douglass, and one of the favorite things he ever said was, "The best things that white people can do for us is leave us alone."
Period.
And I'm sorry.
I said period.
And we were thriving. We were in the face of you. I go back again, empirical data, like even with the horrors of slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, all that stuff. And like I mentioned earlier that Bob Woodson,
Uh-huh.
you know who he is?
Yes.
Okay, so he always says that when white people were at their worst, black people were at their best. And I tie that into what Thomas Sowell said about the hidden century, 1865 to 1965. You cannot deny the fact that black people were getting married at a higher rate.
I listen. I get
Okay, all that stuff, right?
I'm just asking you because I'm asking
We
why
we
hasn't one of those
we,
good
we were
old Republicans undone what Joe Biden and the Democrats have done to black people? Where is one? I'm just asking for one. In fact, when George Bush,
I just gave you three, and you disregarded it. The acts of 64 and 65.
Okay, stop right there. I'm glad you reminded me of that.
And then I mentioned the First Step Act with Trump, and you disregarded that.
I
So
didn't. You know
you said
why
give
I
me one, I
disregard?
gave you three.
Oh, okay. So I'll concede that the First Step Act elect 5 Negroes out. Okay.
I'm gonna grab my charger.
Go ahead.
Okay, got it.
Let 5 black people, 10, 15 black people out. What about the black people that are not in prison? Why hasn't a Republican okay, let's take for example our neighborhoods. We know most of them that are dilapidated are ran by that of the Democrats. Now, when the Republicans have been in power, why haven't they made life better for their Negro constituents?
I mean, I don't know that they haven't, but I know that, I live in a one-party state. California, right. The Democrats have ran this state into the ground.
And you know what the other thing too is, I'm going to get to the civil rights thing. We got about another 15 minutes of civil rights thing. The other thing too is, yes, you're correct. Black people, if you look at the chart without the labels, we are pretty much conservative in our viewpoint. I think a lot of that is tied to religion as well. But I'm pretty sure that if the Republicans said, hey, you know what? Black people, we heard you guys asking for reparations. Bet we got it. We heard y'all asking to hold police officers accountable by way of getting rid of qualified immunity. We heard you. We're going to do that. Oh, yeah.
May I interject really quick?
Sure.
So first of all, I didn't understand Trump's mass appeal within the black community, rappers, all this. I didn't like Trump until he became president. Okay. But my biggest problem, and I have a few, my biggest problem with Trump is that he is just blindly pro law enforcement. I wish he would say.
They all are. It's not just Trump.
I wish he would say we got to get rid of the bad apples.
No, they all are. Every president's all the way back to Eisenhower and then some, right? They've all been pro police. We're giving them more funding. Even Obama, he did the Blue Alert Act, which said, hey, cops, when your life is in danger, we're going to have this blue alert go off to let you know that there's somebody, hunting cops or whatever. So they've all done that. But so I guess, the answer is there is no Republican that has come along or will come along and say, black people, we hear you, because the Republicans now, they are starting now to cater to black Americans, because they see that black Americans have finally, a lot of us, right, have finally realized that we are truly disenfranchised by the Democrat Party. We vote for them more than anybody else, right? But the Democrat Party has basically thumbed their nose at us. And so they're seeing a seepage, if you will. So now the Republicans, because it's not something they do traditionally, now they're starting to say, hey, Black people, we like to talk to you. But they haven't really said anything for us to sink our teeth into. They haven't. I mean, it's just a fact, like Trump is saying, all right, I got my platinum plans by $500 billion he's proposing. Well, we know that reparations is owed to us to the tune of at least 20 trillion plus interest. That pales in comparison to what they owe Black Americans. All right, so let's get back to the civil rights thing here. He said that it passed because of Republicans
Support, yes.
so, can I ask you, how has civil rights, even the one of 1866, how was that 1866, 1886, I think I want to say 1886, one of them. How has that helped us?
Okay, so
How has any of those civil rights bills helped us?
Black men, not women, Black men got the right to vote
Mm-hmm.
with the 15th Amendment to the Constitution. That was 1870. Okay. Why was there a need for a Voting Rights Act 95 years later? Okay. Because
Go ahead.
because Democrats, because my mother from Mississippi, she talked about if you were Black in the South on election day, you did not drive because you were going to get pulled over. It was Democrats charging Black people to vote or take a test. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there was a need for an act off of an amendment 95 years prior. So
How has that helped us?
how did it help us? It allowed us to go vote and not get arrested, not get pulled over, and not have to pay a fee or take a test to vote.
So that we didn't have to do that. How has that helped us? How has civil rights helped us from that point?
Okay, so 64 ended segregation. That helped us.
How?
We could go where we want to go.
Was we doing that in our own Black neighborhoods?
Well, listen, I'm not sure what you're trying to lead me down.
I'm not leading you nowhere, brother.
So I'm also now. This is I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm also not a fan of, like, when I watch football on Saturday, right? We should be on Channel 7, ABC, prime time. Okay? We should be watching Grambling playing Southern. But Black people had this need to integrate, right? So all our best athletes stopped going to HBCUs and they started going to Alabama, right? So, and then another problem I have with MLK, you could spend all day long. Look at MLK speeches on
Trust me, brother.
on YouTube.
You know I know.
His whole worldview, his whole mission statement was asking other people to treat us better. It wasn't an economic movement, right? When we were asking for a seat at the lunch counter, we should have been buying the lunch counter like the Jews did.
So when I said, how did integration help us? And you was like, what? It didn't.
Did I make that face?
You did, brother. It was close to it.
Okay, so I love the fact that there's no signs that say colored, whites only, like my mother grew up with. But I do know the fact that I remember being a teenager wishing Mike Tyson would put his fights on BET.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Because you said, it's good that we don't see signs that say no, colored and, whites colored or whatever the case is. But when those signs were around, and I agree, it's kind of funky, right? But when those signs were around, was the Black man and Black woman in the same home raising children?
Yes.
Were we, economic force? We had our own businesses. We was working for each other. The money was going in and out of there, staying. pretty much in the black community because nobody wanted to do business with us. So what we've done essentially, and I'm not necessarily saying this is you, is that we've traded the black family unit and unity for symbolism. So that's why I was like with the civil rights movement, that's all it, and I'm not trying to, and when I say the civil rights movement is symbolism, I'm not taking away from that of our ancestors. We know that they were really going through it back then, and for whatever reason, it came into their mind that they would be better together. Of course, you know, white flight and all that happened. They still ain't trying to be with black people. And here we are as black people still 2024, thinking that, you know, being integrated with white people is where we need to be. But we were better off before that because we were all we have. And we were tricked into thinking, nah, you could be with white people too. And really, if you just keep it a buck, civil rights movement was a money grab for white people. They needed those black dollars.
The welfare
where the black
system,
dollars have been going ever since.
the welfare system has also been a money grab for white people. So again, I agree with you. Everything about the civil rights movement was not all good for black people. In my opinion, most notably, it ushered in Planned Parenthood to the black family. It incentivized black women not to marry the father of their children. And not most importantly, additionally, it was a political movement, not an economic movement. Like, for example, again, I don't want to get into this, but the Democrat Party clearly has an anti-Semitic problem, right? You have never heard a political pundit or media type say to anyone, "Oh, they must get the Jewish vote." You don't say that. You never hear them say, "Oh, they must get the Asian vote," because those other cultures, their movements were economic and money based, but they always say you got to get the black vote because our movement was politically motivated.
From that, like you said, that of the FDR administration, and way back in, you know, the 30s or whatever. So yeah, I agree with you on that. But I mean, clearly, and this is where the conversation is. This is where the learning point, you know, as they say, iron sharpens iron, what have you. We know that even today, that the civil rights movement, because this is the other thing, black people, our ancestors, and even today, were tricked into thinking the civil rights movement was for us. But in fact, everybody else but black people have benefited from the civil rights movement. Most notably and recently was the Asian community. They got, and that's another question somebody wanted me to ask you, although I already know the answer. The Asian community used the civil rights movement to dismantle the educational component of affirmative action. They used that. We know that with affirmative action, white women were the benefactor of that. We also know that most recently, Keisha Knight Pulliam, the child star actor of the Cosby Show, she's not a kid anymore, but she, along with some of her other black sisters, if you will, they had a group or a business, a nonprofit rather, where they would give black women entrepreneurs grant money. That was also stopped using the Civil Rights Act, I think it's 1866, in regards to contracts, no discrimination in contracts. Well, that was Asians again. They use a Jewish guy, Edward Blum, to do that, to stop them from doing that. And so the United States Supreme Court has used that act and told those black women, y'all cannot give any money out right now until we decide if what you're doing is racist. So I like to call the civil rights movement, if you will, the false idea of civil rights, because again, as I said, we were taught that is just for black people, but everybody else has been whooping our tails ever since civil rights came into existence. Now I know that's kind of hard for a lot of people to hear, but it's just the truth. So,
so there's those people, those other cultures, they're saying that it's reverse discrimination.
Right. But again, they were telling us that's for y'all. With, like you said, the voting, rights where you don't won't be harassed and even killed because you're trying to go vote. That's for y'all black people, but everybody else has been using it. And it's like I said, the United States Supreme Court, by the way, is 6-3 Republican, have been telling black people, oh, no, no, y'all can't do that.
So if I'm not mistaken, it was an all white, all male Supreme Court, excuse me, uh, that overturned Plessy v. Ferguson with
Correct.
Brown versus the Board of Education. Um, Again, I go back to the acts of 64 and 65. So I know this may not be popular, but uh, when I said I learned that white men are not as talented as we're led to believe they are, and we can really compete with them. Matter of fact, in my life, in my world, uh, some of my biggest adversaries or people across the table from me that negotiated just as hard as I did were black men and brown men uh, from lesser means because they've been hunting all their lives. And the white guys are that lion in cap. I hate using the analogy of a lion, but they're that animal in captivity that has been fed and given everything. And when you really sit down from them, they don't know shit.
Yeah, because they gonna get it because their people are in a position to give it to them. Regardless if I mean, come on, we've all worked for somebody who's white woman or white man is like, how the hell did you get this damn job? And then we find out they connected to the source, right? So
Yeah.
they was gonna get it regardless. But I think the idea is that we get our own and we can do that. I was somewhere the other day. Oh, I was at a black owned restaurant, very popular here in Houston. My sister and her friends came down. They want to go eat all over the place. I got to go running 5,000 miles. Never mind. But nevertheless, I was in this black owned restaurant and it was mostly Hispanics working. In
Oh,
fact, there was 3 employee of the month pictures up and they were all Hispanic people.
so may,
So,
may I speak to that real quick?
sure.
Okay, so the left media, they do what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the debate when Trump said they're taking black jobs, oh, what's a black job? Blah blah blah. That's a black job. So 20 years ago, we used to go to Harold and Bell's
Mm-hmm.
in L.A. You know that is right, the
Yeah.
Crenshaw district area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Harold and Bell's has like part of the wall cut out to where you can see in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So myself and my wife walked in there one day, and the whole staff was Mexican. Guess what I did? I
Well,
walked out.
right.
If
But
I go to a soul food restaurant, I want to see an OG back there with a stocking on his head, smoking a cigarette, calling somebody a motherfucker, right?
right.
If I go to an Asian restaurant, I want to see Asians back there. If I go to an authentic a Mexican restaurant, I want to see Mexicans back there. So my point is that was a prime example of when Trump said they're taking black jobs.
But in that
Unle-
case, I want to just push back just a little bit. So I agree with Trump, with the taking black jobs, because a lot of obviously people ran away with it, making it something it wasn't. But in the case of a black owned restaurant that's hiring somebody that don't look like them, those jobs aren't being taken. Those jobs are being given away.
and you know why? You know why? Because even though it's a black owned restaurant, it's ran by Green. Okay. And so we're almost, we're the same age. So uh, I remember, and I'm sure you have family members that worked for Firestone, Goodyear, the textile industry that got laid off in the 70s. I got aunts and uncles that got laid off because doing business became so expensive. People who sign the front of checks are always going to be smarter than politicians. So they took those jobs overseas. So in that MAGA chapter, right? I also talk about. So you left a lot out, D. When was America great again? It was when 90% of the clothes worn in America were made in America. When the Pledge of Allegiance was still in school, like you go out in public in a high school student who you're giving money to at the grocery store or whatever, they know how to say hello. All those standards were, and by the way, uh, when our government didn't put illegal immigrants in front of black people, how many black kids have been displaced in their schools because of illegal immigrants?
I
And
mean,
what, and
quite a
what, and
few.
what, what they're doing now is they're replacing black people with these Hispanics that are crossing our borders. And because they made the southern border so porous, people from other countries, from China, the Middle East, who want to do us wrong, are sneaking through. Why is a Chinese person leaving China, going to somewhere in Central America, and then walking 3,000 miles? Like,
Because they
legit-
know that this government is going to give them everything they want. So when you go back to the argument of reparations, it's like why we can't have our reparations when they being the Democrats, they did open the border. Trump under title, I think it was 42, had the borders closed. Biden and Kamala came on in and busting them wide open. So with that in mind, like everybody, like you said, it's not just from Latin countries or whatever. It's from everywhere. They're coming over here and they getting what there is to get. But then when black people say, "Hey, I want my check," oh well, you don't deserve that. Wasn't my ancestors. Them people coming over here, they ain't got no lineage over here, but they getting stuff. So obviously, you and I can go on and on forever.
so okay, so
Sure,
I know you're gonna wrap up. So next time you have me on, and I hope you have me on because
I
this was
will.
fun. So we didn't get to talk about why I'm not a fan of Obama. I'm not
Okay,
a fan.
somebody did ask that. So if you can, give us a brief explanation as to why you're not a fan of Obama.
Okay, so I did not vote for Obama in '08 or 2012. I also didn't vote for Romney in 2012. I left the top of the ticket blank, okay? Because I wasn't going to vote for a Mormon because how they view black people. So uh, I view Obama and Kamala Harris the same. White liberals, they put these people of color in front of the black community as if they share our interest. I want a black politician that comes from slavery, that comes from the plantation. Obama's father was from Kenya. His mama was white. His only connection to slavery was his white family owned slaves. Kamala's, Kamala's mother was East Indian, and her father was Jamaican. She does not come from the plantation South. So I get insulted when they put these people of color in front of us and expect us to just bend the knee or follow them. Barack Obama does not share. You know why he's against school choice? Well, he's against school choice. He'll publicly say I'm for school choice, but he doesn't want to lose the teachers union, right? But ultimately, he's not for school choice is because he never lived in the inner city. He never lived next to a woman who had to send her child to underperforming school while he sends his girls wherever they want to go. And he wasn't black until he ran for president. And she wasn't black until she ran for president. There's plenty of video of her here in California proudly becoming the first Indian Secretary of State, okay, Attorney General, excuse me,
Attorney General.
Attorney General of
Mhm.
California. They do not represent our interests. And by the way, they both had similar comments about not legislating with a Black American point of view. They both said that.
All what
So
they say, all ties lift all boats or something like that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
and by the way, I honestly, and this has nothing to do with anything other than brain matter. I honestly don't think Kamala Harris is that talented. I don't like the fact that she admitted to doing drugs, smoking weed, while putting black men in jail for smoking weed. Okay, I don't like the fact that she called Joe Biden a racist on national TV, only to become his running mate, and nobody in media asked her to reconcile that. Right. So Trump just picked JD Vance. Right. He was a never Trumper in 2016. So he immediately came out and said why he switched. To this day, I have not heard Kamala Harris explain how she reconciled joining the ticket of a racist. I don't like either one of them.
Got you. Well, you know what? That we do agree, brother. See, we found the common ground somewhere. We do agree. So listen, we've been here about 2 hours and 5 minutes. I love and appreciate every last one of y'all.
It flew by.
Yeah, it doesn't it. And I usually, I get into the comment section and ask a bunch of questions and read everybody's comments. So I don't want you all to feel that I was neglecting you. I just want to have a conversation with Terrell. But I did see you all's comments. So I want to also say this: I'm going to be on vacation next week, so I won't be live. Maybe I'll try if I can. There's not a lot of reception there, but I will be back after that. So I will miss you all dearly. I'll try to put a video up here and there just to kind of keep in touch with you guys. But in the meantime, we're going to get out of here. And you guys have a... Sure, go ahead.
May I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
So I would like to for you to have me back.
Okay.
And I do want to answer any and all questions.
That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a question. I won't say nothing. They gonna do all the I'm just gonna put the questions up.
And we're just starting. So we've recorded 11 hours of my own podcast. We're chopping up now, and all the information, the YouTube, all that stuff will be disseminated through the brand new Instagram account. So if anyone wants to send me questions or hate or whatever, criticize me, just go to It's Terrell Pink at Instagram.
And I put it in the description box. Your Instagram description box.
So
yes.
I take all. I'm willing to debate anyone. So my platform, I hope to one day I'll debate Cornel West to Michael Eric Dyson. I want to have Candace Owens in the studio. I want to ask her why she attacked George Floyd and why she alienates Black people so much. So all of that stuff, right? And I'm gonna end on this note. That's really gonna piss your audience off.
You're gonna have us here a whole another half an hour. Be careful.
No. So after we hang up, I'm getting ready to go play golf.
And I go to Top Golf sometimes too.
Okay, good.
So anyway, y'all, so we're gonna have
thank you, G. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So we're gonna have Brother Terrell back here one day, and I'm gonna let y'all ask all the questions. Of course, is the book completed yet? Or are you still in the process of writing?
Oh, here's what happened. So the man who raised me, he just passed. So in the book, I characterize it the most complicated relationship in my life. Okay, so his passing and his funeral services, I'm including in the book, and we're just finalizing the editing and smoothing things out.
Okay, so we'll have you back, and I'm gonna let them. I might even bring some, people up, and I'll just sit here and I'll just moderate and have them ask you questions and stuff. So again, y'all, you guys can reach out to Brother Terrell. His information is in the description box. I'm going on a cruise. So those of y'all who've been on a cruise, sometimes the reception is like, golly, it says it on your phone. It just says you're in the abyss. That's the signal you get, the abyss. So you don't always get reception. So for whatever reason I will try to come live, just say hello to y'all for just a couple of minutes or whatever. But you guys, please be well and have a great day and stay cool out there. And I'll see you all in a little while. Peace.
Thank you, Dee.
You're welcome.